If you're experiencing hair loss, there's a good chance the problem isn't actually on your scalp. And that's why so many men spend hundreds of dollars on shampoos, oils, and supplements that never address the real cause. Because in many cases, hair loss isn't just a surface level issue. It can also be a sign of an underlying hormonal imbalance that's affecting your body's natural hair growth cycle. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5 hormone imbalances that I see most often in my male patients and how each one affects your hair differently. But stick around until the end because I'll show you how all of these seemingly different problems end up feeding into the same process that's responsible for most male pattern hair loss. Hi, I'm Bobby Spence. I'm a certified trichologist with over 20 years experience. I've helped thousands of patients improve their hair growth and their density. So let's get into it. I'll walk you through each of these one at a time and I'll tell you exactly what to look for with each one because the pattern your hair loss follows usually tells you which hormone is behind it. And the first hormone I want to talk about is cortisol. It is the stress hormone, and I see that it affects hair in 2 very different ways. And it depends on whether it's running too high or if it's running too low. With chronically high cortisol, which often comes too constant in terms of work stress, poor sleep, and ongoing anxiety, your body starts breaking down protein. And since your hair is made of protein, that can directly affect the way it grows. When cortisol stays elevated for too long of a period of time, it pushes more hair follicles into the resting phase, which leads to increased shedding. What you'll usually notice is diffuse thinning where hair loss, it spreads across the entire scalp rather than concentrated in one area. Then there's the other extreme, a major stress event like an accident, a serious illness, or emotional trauma that can disrupt the body's normal hormonal balance. And some people, that can throw the immune system off course and trigger what's called alopecia areata, which is a condition where the body attacks its own hair follicles. The results is sudden. You get a round, patchy bald spot that often appears without any warning. So remember this, low cortisol tends to show up as patchy hair loss. High cortisol tends to show up as overall thinning. If your hair loss started right after a period of intense stress or a specific event, I want cortisol checked first. But cortisol isn't the only hormone working quietly in the background. There's another one that most men don't even think that's associated with hair loss at all, and it's estrogen. I know estrogen gets labeled as the female hormone, but you produce it too, just in smaller amounts, and it plays a real role in regulating your other hormones. When your estrogen levels climb to high levels, it can suppress your thyroid function, and your thyroid controls your metabolism, including your metabolic activity that keeps your hair follicles cycling normally. So high estrogen leads to lower thyroid function, and that leads to hair loss. In men, I typically see elevated estrogen linked with few common factors. One of them is carrying extra weight because fat tissue naturally converts some testosterone into estrogen. And I also see it associated with poor liver function, certain medications, and long-term heavy alcohol use. So if your thyroid symptoms and your hair thinning showed up around the same time, then this is usually linked and it's connecting both of them. Now, thyroid function actually ties into the next hormone on this list too, but this one isn't about a hormone running too high. It's about what happens when your body starts resisting one altogether. And I'm talking about insulin resistance. This is one I see overlooked the most in my practice. Insulin's main job is to regulate your body's blood sugar. But when insulin levels stay too high for too long a period of time, whether because of insulin resistance, a high sugar diet, or early prediabetes, it can do more than that. It can also increase the production of androgens, which are the hormones like testosterone. Now, more testosterone might sound like a good thing on paper, but some of that testosterone gets converted into a much more powerful hormone called DHT. DHT is one of the main drivers of hair follicle shrinkage, and I'll explain exactly that process, how it works in a minute. So if you eat a lot of sugar, carry extra weight around your midsection, or have a family history of diabetes, I would consider insulin resistance as a possible factor contributing to higher DHT levels and in turn your hair loss. This same insulin pathway is where a bit of hormonal hair loss is in women, and it comes in particularly with what's called PCOS. It's the same mechanism, it just tends to show up differently as thinning along the part area rather than at the hairline. Speaking of thyroid, I mentioned it earlier with estrogen, but it deserves its own explanation because there's a sign of thyroid-related hair loss that almost none of my patients catch on their own. When your thyroid is underactive, a condition known as hypothyroidism, your entire metabolism slows down. That includes the metabolic activity your hair follicles need in order to grow properly. Some of the common signs include fatigue, weight gain, feeling cold all the time, dry skin. But there's one symptom that many of my patients never connect to their thyroid, and that's thinning along the outer third of the eyebrows. If you've noticed that your hair on the outer edges of your eyebrows are getting thinner, along with general thinning on your scalp, that's an important clue that makes me think about the possibility of a thyroid issue. In that situation, I want to take a closer look at your thyroid levels. Now, everything I've covered so far, from cortisol and estrogen to insulin resistance and thyroid health, ultimately connects to one pathway that's responsible for most male pattern hair loss. It's something most men have heard about, but very few understand what's actually happening inside their body. That pathway involves testosterone being converted into a hormone called DHT, or dihydrotestosterone. It's responsible for the vast majority of male pattern hair loss I see in my practice. But testosterone isn't the villain. An enzyme in your body converts some of your testosterone into DHT, which attaches to receptors on the hair follicles, especially around the hairline and the crown, because those areas are genetically more sensitive to it. Over time, it weakens the hair root and causes the follicle to shrink through a process known as miniaturization. As that happens, each new hair grows back thinner and weaker than the one before. And at first, you probably won't notice anything, but over time, the hairline starts to recede, the crown begins to thin, and eventually the follicles start producing hair all together. And this is exactly why the other 4 imbalances we've talked about matter so much. Cortisol, estrogen, insulin resistance, and thyroid dysfunction can all affect the same pathway. They're not separate problems. They can all contribute to the hormonal changes that drive hair loss. Women experience a version of this as well. After pregnancy or during menopause, estrogen levels fall while testosterone remains relatively stable. That shift can make this pathway more active. It's usually less severe than what we see in men, but the basic mechanism is very similar. It simply shows up at a different stage of life. Now that we've looked at how these 5 hormones are connected, let's talk about what you should actually do with this information. Hair loss is rarely caused by just one thing. Genetics, nutrition, iron, and vitamin D levels, inflammation, and scalp health can all play a role as well. But if your hair loss has been getting progressively worse, or it doesn't seem to follow just a simple pattern, I think it's worth taking hormones seriously instead of just questioning. So here's what I recommend. First, pay attention to the pattern of your hair loss. Is it patchy? Is it spreading across the scalp? Or is it mainly affecting the hairline and the crown? Secondly, look at the symptoms that come with it. Are you feeling more fatigued than usual? Have you noticed weight changes, increased stress, or thinning around your eyebrows? And finally, get it confirmed with proper blood work instead of making assumptions. Once you understand what's actually driving your hair loss, you can focus on treating the real cause rather than covering up the symptoms with another product on your shelf. And the only way to know which of these are actually affecting your hair loss is to test for it. That's where the blood work comes in. You need to know which test to get and what the results actually mean. That's exactly why I've made the next video. I'll walk you through the 5 blood tests I actually recommend my patients to get, and more importantly, the exact numbers I want to see for each one. Watch this video now and find out exactly where you stand.